Joining us now is Levi Browde, Executive Director of the Falun Dafa Information Center. Levi, so your organization is a source for reliable information on the practice of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice that's currently persecuted in China by the Chinese Communist Party, and you spread awareness of the persecution and counter propaganda by the regime. Now, on January 8th, your team received a death threat that contained your name. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure. On our website, people can submit questions, information, things like that. And this has happened a few times. Someone submitted a threat, not just to me, but to all the staff members that are publicly listed with my organization, essentially saying that we and all of our family members will be killed over the next, several weeks.
I mean, how do you deal with that? You said this isn't the first time; it's numerous times. What goes through your mind? What is your mental state?
Well, I think it shows, first of all, unfortunately, it wasn't a surprise, and it shows just how low the Chinese regime, its proxies, its thugs that is deployed around the world will go to try and silence communities who are openly critical of the human rights atrocities going on in China, as well as the transnational oppression happening abroad. And certainly my organization, the Falun Dafa Information Center, is right at the center of doing that. And so while it was not a surprise, it does sort of show just how low they'll go to try and intimidate us, to try and silence us.
You know, we've reported a lot about transnational repression by the Chinese regime. We've seen how the Chinese embassies act as propaganda organs for the Communist Party. How does this bode for countries like, for example, the UK, where a new Chinese mega embassy has been granted approval in central London, despite, much concern, criticism as well from human rights activists and politicians there? Just your comments.
I think there's a fundamental problem with how people view the Chinese regime. Too often, they either view it as a normal government that is capable of sort of civil discourse and conducting itself properly. Really, it's a gang. I mean, if you look at this is a regime that is responsible for tens of millions of deaths of its own people over the many decades. This is a regime that, by most people's account, is currently engaged in not one, two, but three genocides, including Falun Gong. And so I think there needs to be a fundamental shift that when we're dealing with the Chinese regime, when we're dealing specifically with the Chinese Communist Party, we're dealing with a gang that is out to really destroy a lot of what we hold dear, certainly in the West, and it needs to be treated as such. And I think its track record, both inside China and again, its transnational oppression against people all around the world, I think bears that out. And that's really what we need to be looking at it when we see things like, should we approve such a super embassy in London or anything of that nature?
And Levi, I have to bring up another thing. The current Chinese embassy in London has previously sent threatening letters to theaters in London, trying to prevent them from hosting Shenyun Performing Arts. Can I ask you, why is Shenyun, which is an American dance company based in New York, why is it being targeted this way?
So Shenyun, from Beijing's perspective, Shenyun actually constitutes what comes close to an existential threat for two main reasons. One is that Shenyun is bringing back the authentic culture of China and putting it on the stage for the world to see. This is the culture that the Chinese regime tried to destroy because they wanted to replace it with adherents, admirers for the Communist Party. And so while they're trying to convert everybody in China to be good sort of citizens in the communist nation, in order to do that, they really had to try and destroy their homegrown culture. Shenyun is bringing that back. Shenyun is the renaissance, really, of Chinese culture. So that's the first reason. The second reason is Shenyun is very brave. It tells the full story of Chinese history, including modern China, the tyranny of the CCP, the heroism of Falun Gong and other types of people standing up peacefully to that tyranny. And that is a message that Beijing does not want anybody to see.
And I know this is not just happening in London. Can you tell us about exactly the scope of this, where Shenyun is being targeted, and how long has this been going on?
Sure. Actually, my organization did an exhaustive study of this, and we found that the Chinese regime has been targeting Shenyun, and these are the incidents we just found, at least 40 countries around the world, and this has been going on for 20 years. And it spans the full gamut from high level officials, sometimes the ambassador in a given country, threatening theaters, local government officials not to host Shenyun, all the way down to sort of grotesque thuggery type stuff, sabotaging Shenyun's vehicles, slashing their tires, threatening economic, sort of sanction type stuff if Shenyun is allowed to perform in a city, and sort of everything in between. They've jailed Shenyun performers' family members that are in China. They've thrown them in prison. So we've seen all kinds of things happen over the last 20 years, and I think that it has in the last 2 years escalated dramatically. And one of the key examples of that is, of course, all these death and bomb threats that theaters around the world, governments around the world, my organization, other elements of the Falun Gong diaspora has been targeted with these bomb threats and these threats to mass shootings for the last 2 years. And some of those threats, particularly the ones that were sent in Taiwan, were actually traced back to China. So we know where it's coming from. This is the kind of thing they're engaged with.
Okay, Levi, before we let you go, I'd just like to have you reiterate again to our viewers why the Chinese regime goes to such lengths, making bomb threats to theaters, sending death threats to organizations like yours. What's the objective here? Why is this level of control or influence happening outside of China itself?
It's doing this to try and silence Shenyun or scare Americans to not want to go see Shenyun because of Shenyun's message. Shenyun shows that there is the authentic Chinese culture. What it really is a culture that the Chinese regime in Beijing has spent decades and billions of dollars trying to eradicate and destroy so they can really impose Marxism on people. And Shenyun is bringing all that back. Shenyun is also showing the tyranny of the CCP on stage, showing the heroism of Falun Gong. Beijing has spent billions and billions of dollars trying to convince the world that Falun Gong is somehow a weird group or dangerous group. And here you go to a Shenyun show and you see hopeful, inspiring, divinely inspired sort of messages on the stage brought to you by the artists of Shenyun who all practice Falun Gong. And so all of this terrifies Beijing.
Okay, Levi, thank you so much for talking to us about this very important topic.
Thank you so much.